Brand new, never before seen Arnold information.
You heard it here first. Bullshit. There's
We got to
nothing
keep
coming
doing
our way.
we got to keep doing the clickbait stuff.
Was Arnold even in the Olympia? Is Arnold Schwarzenegger real? Alien, perhaps?
Arnold like birds, government drone.
Does he speak English? I don't know. Like,
Well,
he's just like stupid as shit. Yeah, barely, yeah. Was he even from Austria or was he from a lab? Gotta come up with something ridiculous that doesn't exist.
Well, that brings us to our topic for today. We've done some deep dives in the past of some different influencers or bodybuilders, and we'll be taking a look at the man today, Arnold. Basically, the guy who brought fame to the sport of bodybuilding, the guy who kind of popularized and made bodybuilding what it is today. The money wasn't so much when he was around, but he certainly was a influencing factor for it.
I'm gonna look up the prize winnings for like the Olympia winnings, because
Current
back
or
then,
when he was,
I'm gonna look up the past. So,
well, yeah, it was you got like a your meal paid for that day.
yeah, literally though, it was like nothing. Let me see, prize money. There's gotta be like a history of it. Every Olympia winner and prize money. All right, let's see what we got here. Yeah, so to put it into perspective, this is not really that current, but this year Derek Lunsford winning, I believe he got $400,000 for winning the Mr. Olympia. Which back in Arnold's time, there's just Mr. Olympia. There was no anything else to it. There was no female competitors, no other divisions. It was just one competition, one division. It was just men's open. So when he was competing, 1970 through 1973, it was, let me see. I guess it just skips out in 1980. So 1970 to 1973, he got $1,000, which with inflation,
like per Olympia or total between those years?
Yeah, no, per.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me see here. So $1,000 in, we'll just say 1970, is equivalent to $8,000 today. So he won $8,000 essentially, 1970 through 1973, and then $2,500 for his 74 and 75 win. So for that, that'll be like, let's move to 74. It's about 16,500.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So just about double, with inflation and all of that included. I don't know what he won for 1980. At least this site doesn't say it. But looking at the other years, it looks like 1980 must have been 25,000 because Franco Colombo won in 1981 and he got 25,000. And then Chris Dickerson won in 1982. That was 25,000. So it's very possible that the 1980 Olympia, he won 25,000. But that might have been the year that was the year that was controversial for his win?
I want to say 79 was his controversial.
He never won 79.
Okay. It was one of the late 70s. That's all I know.
Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. So he won. Okay. So it wasn't the controversial one. So he won 25,000 that year. So 1980 was the year that it really upticked. So he went from essentially 16,500 in today's money to, let me see, just under $100,000 in today's money. So I mean, that's a pretty big jump from one year to the next because 1979 was, who was it? Okay, so 1979 they had 15,000 for Frank Zane. No, 79 was 25,000. 78 was 15,000. 77 was 5,000. And then 76 was 5,000. So they upped it in 76. They upped it again in 78, and then they upped it again in 79. 5,000 until 1984, which was then 50,000, and then they slowly increased over time from there. But yeah, so now the prize money ever since 2017 has been 400,000, which is one of the longest stretches actually of a prize money without adjustment. Each year they go up, but since 2017, the past 6, 7 Olympias, they haven't adjusted it. So yeah, 400 grand ever since 2017.
And overall, the point we're making here is that your boy Arnold did it purely for the love of the sport, and
Hmm.
he was actively working like hard physical labor jobs with Franco Colombo while performing at the Olympia and training like a madman. Like he did get paid and was provided housing for a time by Joe Weider when he first came over from Austria. But over time, he just started to do jobs and start looking into his real estate portfolio and all of that. And he just started doing real work. So he was doing essentially the training and everything that people do now while also working a full time job,
Yeah.
which is nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to hear because he does talk about that, like in different documentaries and stuff like that, how there really was no money. I mean, even in sponsorships and all of that, there really was no money at any point to be made. Really, it's just the magazines, really, if you're going to make anything, and then a smattering of money from different competitions. But this was also like, especially the 80s. The 80s was really the year of like experimentation when it came to bodybuilding competitions and all of that. Because with the 80s, we kind of slowly moved into the 90s where like the mass monsters came about with Dorian Yates. So like the 80s was a really weird place where it was like not many people really know a lot of the winners from the 80s. I mean, Lee Haney pretty much dominated the entirety of the 80s. Prior to that was Samir Bannout and Chris Dickerson. Franco Colombo won in the 80s, and then Arnold won 1980. But one of the things that started, I think, in the late 80s and was getting into the early 90s that failed, but retrospectively, we're like, okay, that makes sense why it failed. But at the time, bodybuilding was still pretty fresh. And I mean, Lee Haney was winning 50 grand when he first started winning the Olympia and then winning 100 grand towards the end of his Olympia wins. But that was when like not Lee Priest. Why am I drawing a blank? Quadzilla, what's his name? Fucking, why am I drawing a blank? Blonde guy, 5 more reps.
Oh, come on, Tom.
Tom Platz.
There we go.
So Tom Platz, he started a bodybuilding competition series, or he was trying to, where instead of prize money being paid out per show, it would be like a series of shows that you'd sign a contract and you compete at these shows and you get paid yearly, right? So like you get
Mm,
like an annual salary. Well, you'd get paid monthly or whatever the actual payment schedule was,
the
but
breakdown, yeah.
yeah, there's an actual annual amount that you get paid, and you compete at the shows that the show is putting on. So it's almost kind of like, in a way, like a traveling entertainment rather than like bodybuilding competitions. So that was like Tom Platz's idea, and one of the biggest bodybuilders that he approached was actually Dorian Yates, and Dorian was just like, look, I can't do it. I just truly think I'm going to become Mr. Olympia one day, and I have to go for that. So
And at the
he
same
respected
time,
that. Mhm.
at the same time, like you can't expect bodybuilders to stay in bodybuilding shape for that long. That's
Um,
multiple shows. Like, I mean, Tom Platz is very knowledgeable about all of it, but I'm sure it was going to be kind of pushing it to the test.
yeah, so it was called World Bodybuilding Federation, so WBF. 1991 actually. So it was founded by Vince McMahon, the guy behind
Yeah,
WWE.
McMahon he himself didn't ever go for the Olympia, but he was big into bodybuilding himself. So
Yeah. So I stayed corrected. It was not the 1980s. It was 1990 when it started. It dissolved in 92. But basically it says it was bigger prize money and more dramatic events to the sports of bodybuilding. Um, it's going to be pay-per-view, just like anything else. Yeah. Signed
can you
long-term contracts with a number of IPB regulars to join its rosters with annual salaries as high as 400 grand.
can you imagine? All right, gentlemen, have a front lap pose, and then the commentators go, "My God, from a steel chair from behind."
Yeah, yeah. So he just like dives in and smacks Dorian Yates on the top of the head with a steel chair. Um, And then stupidly, they introduced a fucking drug testing policy.
Yeah, that's no
And
good.
that's what it was right there. So, well, it was WWF wrestlers um, that were tested and all of that, and that went south, and therefore World Bodybuilding Federation went south. So it was, I guess, maybe it wasn't just the salaries; it was a combination of salaries and prize winnings for shows, but it was
Hmm.
going to be treated more like, um, like the WWE, where it's events and they showed up and competed and all of that.
Yeah, and that where I mean the WWE contract breaks down into two different ways. You can sign what's called the safety contract, where you get paid a set amount for the entirety of your contract. So, like, let's say you sign a 3-year contract and you sign the safety one, you get paid, X amount of money each week. That like regardless of how big or small you get, that's what you get. And then you can sign. I forget what the actual name of it is, but it's like an audience factor one where you get a ticket or you get a percentage of the ticket sales, but you have to be in one of the main events or you have to be a contributing factor to the show. So you can make a ton more money, but if you drop and like because the WWE they put on the people that the fans want to see. And so if you're not one of those people and you have one of those contracts, you tank and that's why people end up getting cut or just aren't able to cut it.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe that was like the idea. But yeah, it says right here the WBF World Bodybuilding Federation introduced drug testing in March 1992, and I mean that's pretty much it right there. I mean you can't have the best bodybuilders in the world and be like, oh, we have to drug test you. It's like, dude, you're asking for bottom barrel natural athletes, and that's not gonna do well.
You have to
So
understand, like they had to understand that, especially in the '90s. Like this was when people were going crazy with what they were taking. Like,
yeah, it's I mean, it didn't really do well in the first place throughout the 2 years. The championship of the WBF in 1992 only had 3,000 people purchasing the actual pay-per-view. So like it was a complete fucking failure. I mean, let's say, the average pay-per-view now is like $60, right? Or something like that, especially for like UFC stuff like that. So let's say you're paying $60 to watch something like that. You're talking about 180 grand, and they're talking about salaries for people up to 400 grand. Like the
and I
championship
mean,
itself wouldn't even have paid for half the salary of someone.
and I
So
was gonna say, plus all the fees that come in with renting out a stadium venue or wherever you did it, and
yeah.
the crew that it takes to do. Like, I'm sure there was, pyro and different sound things and lighting and all
Mhm.
of that, and that takes a cut too. So you're walking away not even profitable.
Yeah, it was a big failure. I could see the idea behind it, and I get that where they're like, look, if you only compete in WBF competitions, we'll pay you X salary and also the prize money, and that's how they were trying to like poach these athletes from other competitions. So I get where they were going, but it just didn't go the way that they planned. So it was unfortunate, but I mean, it was their own fault. It
It
wasn't
really
like
sounds it really sounds like it was just a passion project of McMahon because he's a billionaire. Like he had no
Mhm.
shortage of money. So this really just sounds like a passion project where he was like, "Let's see if we can make this happen."
I mean, he also started the XFL as well,
Yep.
prior to Dwayne Johnson and all them picking it up, which is also interesting. So Mayan is like, look, let's change things up. Like he's trying to like make things different. I think is kind of like his idea. It was like especially with like with the WBF and the XFL, he's like, let's take the foundation of what this is and make it like this, so that's more entertaining. And it's like same with the XFL. I feel like XFL in a way can be very entertaining in comparison to the NFL. Obviously, they're apples and oranges, kind of the only real similarity is just they're playing a version of football, but like there's a give and take here. You know, what I mean, there's entertainment factors for both. So I could see where he's going with it. It just he just needs to execute better. In the case of WBF, and it ended up just failing.
Yeah.
But so to loop it back to Arnold, the which we did kind of get on a tangent there. Arnold competed in the Olympias 1973 1975. It was controversial whether or not he should have won in 1980 in the first place. There was a year where they protested. I always forget what year it is. Let me see, Mr. Olympia. It was a boycott, I think. So there was a year. Well, it was in 1981. Well, okay, so here's saying why the 1980 was so controversial. 1977 film Pumping Iron came out. He was a 75 Olympia, blah, blah, blah. I do know that in 1980, he was nowhere near the conditioning of other athletes. So, like,
Oh, I mean,
running was,
that's the one where Mike Mentzer got robbed.
yeah, it was. That's why people were so upset with that one. And he was just kind of like the crowd favorite, and that was the problem. So, Arnold at the Olympia. Let me see. What he lacked in muscularity and leanness, he made up for charisma. So really, it was just the entertainment factor is what made him win the Olympia that year in comparison to other competitors. Um, but the 1981 Olympia was the year that everybody boycotted. So let me see. Veterans Memorial Auditorium, Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, it was a political controversy. A lot of people boycotted it because of them getting involved with politics or something like that. But they still had 17 competitors, Franco Colombo winning, Chris Dickerson second, and Tom Platz third. So it was still, they still had some pretty decent people competing at that show. But with Arnold's, obvious success with the Olympia and with bodybuilding in general, 1982 is where he made his big, movie debut with Conan the Barbarian, which, there's a whole story behind that where, he was 250 pounds or something like that. And the director said, I need you under 215.
And this was right after winning an Olympia.
Yeah, it was right after 1980 Olympia. So he had to really downsize and he did a lot of running and all of that. And he ended up getting down to like 212 or something. So he beat it by like a few pounds. He only had was it like a couple months to do it or some shit? Like it was not long.
Yeah, it was in like the 3-month ballpark. And
Yeah.
it's funny you
So,
brought up 212. That's where the 212 division came from Conan the
yeah,
Barbarian.
clear as
never
day, obviously.
never before seen information comes to light.
You heard it here first. We get the exclusive.
Yeah, not 43 years old, but we got it
Yeah.
here first.
We know a guy. So with the event of Conan Barbarian and all of that, obviously Arnold was getting bigger and bigger. More and more movies came out. The Terminator, phenomenal movie. All three Terminator movies I think are great. And then he, proceeded on to other projects from there. Obviously, he became governor. If you guys haven't watched the Netflix documentary, it's phenomenal. Stoph read the autobiography. Is that also good too?
Mm.
Like, did you enjoy that?
It's real good because if you get the Audible version, the first couple chapters and the last couple chapters are read by him. So unless you have experience listening to someone with an Austrian accent or in my case German accent I'm used to hearing, it can be real difficult to understand what he's saying. But it's a real good read because it gets into some details that he doesn't share otherwise. Like
Mm.
especially like his affair and all of that.
They did go pretty in depth in that with the documentary. So it's possible that like the documentary it's got a lot of similar information to a lot of
Yeah.
autobiography. So yeah, there's a whole thing with the, affair and whatnot. And that's really outside of everything else. But the documentary on Netflix is really, really good. My wife and I watched it. We really enjoyed it. It was pretty entertaining and it showed a lot of the side of Arnold that a lot of people don't talk about. Granted, a lot of people who are behind the scenes involved with Arnold say, I forget who I was watching. They were saying that like, Arnold was kind of like the way he portrays himself to the public is different than the way he portrays himself behind closed doors. And the
Mm.
way he treated people in bodybuilding was not as favorable as people think it is. So there's a lot more than meets the eye with Arnold. He's not, perfect, obviously, and I'm sure that there's been problems and feuds and all of that in the past. But even just like the side of like anabolics too, right? There's this whole conversation of like, what did these guys take? And we brought it up before, but the other thing we brought up too, that Arnold, he doesn't touch on anabolics at all, which I wish he did in the
Oh,
documentary.
he does in the autobiography.
Yeah, which I should read, but in the documentary he doesn't. I wish he did, but I get why he didn't. It's more of a broader audience. That's more general. The autobiography, like you're really taking more time out of your day to read about him, so it's more in depth. But
Hmm.
um, with the anabolics, the a lot of the feuds that you see nowadays between these older guys is they're competing now to be like, oh, who, obviously everybody took kind of the same shit back then because there's not much that was out, but it was like who took the least but still did the best. That was like that's like, so Tom Platz is like, oh, I only took few hundred milligrams of test and like 40 whatever milligrams of D-ball or whatever it was. But then somebody else is like, oh, I took 230. It's like this stupid competition of like who took the least but was still successful. Where now
Yeah.
today it's like, obviously it's a different world today, but it's less about who took the least amount and it's more about like who took the safest shit now.
Today it's who survived taking what you
Yeah,
took.
it's basically who hasn't taken trend is basically what it comes down to. Which C-Bum talked about. He's like, "Oh, I would never touch trend." I'm like, "You've totally touched that shit at some point. There's no way you haven't." I get why he doesn't do it now. You know,
He's one of the few people I'd be willing to listen to and actually believe in saying that he didn't.
well, he said so during the podcast that he was on. He said that that was the one steroid he doesn't want to touch, and I get that now. But I'll be very surprised. He said he never touched it, but I'll be very surprised if that's true. Because in the grand scheme of things, we're talking, a lot of these guys are training and taking anabolics for 10 plus years, and a trend cycle can be anywhere from like 6 weeks for me. Like that was like a shorter end to like 16 weeks. So, I mean, it could be a blip in time that you literally forget about. Like I
Mhm.
could not tell you every single one of my cycles I've taken, which is like four, 3 or 4 like actual blast cycles, and then like one prep cycle. So like I couldn't really tell you like for sure like this is what I took then. So it's very possible he forgot. And then same with these older guys, like do they really remember every single cycle that they ever took? Like there's no way. You'd have to write it down and you have to keep track of it over time, which I kind of want to do. I
Yeah.
kind of want to go back through all of my notes and conversations and all of that with people and just find what I took over time and like have like an actual detailed calendar.
Me and you arguing in 60 years going, I only touched LGD.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're gonna be, by the time we're older, there's gonna be like nanobots and shit that like you don't even have to train. You just sit there, you're just like growing muscle. There's a book
Hi,
called Red.
I'd like 1 pound of muscle, please. Yep.
Yeah, it's literally how it's gonna end up being. There's a book called, I think it's Red Rising. I read. Is it Red Rising? Yeah, it's Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I got to read the further series of it, but Red Rising, it's a sci-fi book that takes place in the future, and there is this machine that the character gets into where whatever direction you move in, the machine does the opposite. So like if you're like curling, it pushes against your arm so that you're like essentially curling a weight, right? So
Yeah.
like it's to get as muscular as possible, as fast as possible. So like they do these scenarios where like you do like obstacle courses and stuff, but like by doing these obstacle courses, he's essentially lifting weight at the same time. Like if he's
Mm.
pulling himself up, he's doing his like weight plus the friction from the machine. So it's hypertrophy. He's literally doing just constant hypertrophy for everything. And I think that could be a route, people go in, especially when recovery gets to a better place with drugs and all of that, where you could train everything every day and still make progress. But obviously we're on a more of a tangent. So to loop it back to Arnold, with all the controversy of drugs and all of that, Arnold did start his own competition called the Arnold Classic, which is indirect competition to the Olympia. So the let me look up exactly the years of the Arnold Classic. Um, Arnold Sports Festival started in 1989. Um, the first ever winner overall for the Arnold Classic was Rich Gaspari, who owns Gaspari Nutrition, which is a great brand. Actually, you guys should really check out Gaspari Nutrition. And then Miss International, which is, the female version of the Olympia, was Jackie Paisley. So that was 1989. In 1994, they got Fitness International, which is women's fitness division. So what we just call fitness now, the Olympia Fitness or women's fitness. Started then. And then starting 2000, when Flex Wheeler won the Arnold, they also introduced the heavyweight and lightweight versions of Miss International, which is the Mrs. Olympia. And there's also the overall. So you'd have the winner of the heavyweight and the lightweight. They'd compete and you get an overall. So that year was Vicky Gates winning heavyweight and overall, and then Brenda Ragnot winning lightweight.
Hmm.
Figure was introduced 2003. So at this point, you essentially have four divisions essentially of women's and one division for men. So I mean, which is really
Gotta
interesting to
take
think
it
of.
back, fellas.
Yeah, we ended up taking it back. So then 2006, there's no more heavyweight and lightweight of women's, and this is Iris Kyle's time for reign. So believe it or not, the most number of Olympia, like
It's by
arguably,
Iris, yeah.
yeah, arguably the most successful bodybuilder of all time is Iris Kyle. Just title wise, because she won 9 Olympias, I believe, which is the most out of anybody. And she won a bunch of Arnolds as well. Like she just fucking dominated from 2006 until 2013, when she unfortunately got the call that Miss Olympia or Miss International is no longer going to be held at the Classic. And this is literally the downfall. 2014 was the downfall of women's bodybuilding, as far as like women's open goes, because the Olympia doesn't hold a women's open anymore. Same with the Arnold Classic. So there's obviously, debate on where that came. Oh, Iris Kyle won 2004. Okay, that's where she started. 2004. She lost 2005, but then she won 2006 and just kept winning after that, pretty much. Besides one person won in 2008. But anyways, just to add to what I'm saying, women's bodybuilding was not bringing in the popularity that it used to be bringing in. So they're actually losing so much money on women's bodybuilding that they're like, look, we just have to cut it. We can't support it anymore.
Hmm.
It's not the way that the uh, industry is going, unfortunately, which is kind of unfortunate, but also I think is in a way, to me personally, I think it's a good thing just because seeing the women's open competitors, you're the requirement to get to that level for a female body is far beyond what a men's open competitor has to do. Like the
Hmm.
amount of gear that they have to take, like will fuck you up. Like women, they lose years of their lives just to compete in that division, let alone win like Iris Kyle did. And
Well, the big thing is like when men do it, you continue your life after bodybuilding as a man and you just continue doing whatever you're doing. But for the women, the ones who win that, you continue your life essentially as a man because your body has changed so much. Like I mean the most people, most women in Olympia level stuff look like they would belong in a man's world. So you basically start having a life like that.
yeah, which is a lot to ask of someone competing in that division. And I want to say that, especially at that level, you're basically castrating yourself, whatever the female version of that is. Like, there's no way after all that you're going to be able to have kids. I really, really highly doubt that. Um, I don't know enough to really comment on how it works, but just from my knowledge of the endocrine system and how hormones work and all of that, there's just, to me, there's just no way that you can push your body to that limit and be able to still have kids. For men, it's simply like almost like a feedback loop, not quite to that level, but it's, feedback loop within the body. A good example of that is like your thyroid, where if your thyroid shuts down because of synthetic use of something, and you stop that synthetic use, you're after roughly a couple of weeks, your thyroid will kick back on. It'll notice,
Hmm.
hey, I'm not getting this anymore, so I got to turn back on. You have to go through PCT in order to do that for your pituitary gland and your prostate and your testes in order to produce all your testosterone, your sperm, all of that in order to get back to normal. But for the most part, you can get back to normal. With women, it's a different ball game. Women's hormones, even though this is surprising to hear, is to me is way more complicated than men's hormones, because you're getting involved with actually bearing children, eggs, and you got your period and shedding your uterus walls and all of that. Like there's so much more involved in the female body, which to me is also kind of surprising to hear. Like there's way more birth control options for women than men, but it is very hard to stop sperm production and not destroy your hormones as a man. That's the
Yeah.
difference, I think. So it's kind of backwards logic that women's hormones are so complex, and yet it's much easier to stop the birthing process for a woman than it is for a man. But anyways, point is,
Speaking of having children, Arnold.
yeah, in his affair, he had, what was it, two with his wife and then one with his affair, I
Yes.
think.
Not
And
not really something we're gonna go super in depth with, but that was just my
yeah,
segue back to it.
yeah, no. So, anyways, yeah, which actually his son is, I think
Competing
he's,
or something like that, isn't he? I
no,
could have
he's
sworn
not.
I saw something about.
He trains. I don't think he competes though. He might be competing at some point, but he's not nearly the pro level.
Yeah.
He does act though. He was in Gen V. He was Golden Boy or whatever his name was, the main character in Gen V on Amazon Prime. If you guys ever watched that, the guy who's basically like, he turns into fire. That's Arnold's son actually, and that's his essentially a fair son. But he looks just like Arnold. It's fucking crazy. Um,
Yeah, looks like he's just a gym rat, but he's
okay,
yeah, it doesn't look like he's actually involved in um oh, he's our age. Wow.
yeah, he's not that old.
97. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So to get back to it, Arnold then introduced figure and bikini. So figure started 2003, bikini started 2011. So at this point, we have the Olympia. In 2011, we have the Olympia. We have the Women's Open. Basically, we have fitness, figure, and bikini. So now we have, they got rid of heavyweight and lightweight categories. So we have essentially four divisions um, for women, one division for men. 2014 came the 212 division for 2014 for men's, and then 2015 we got women's physique and men's physique. Women's physique is kind of the barrier, the bridge between like fitness and Miss International. It's like women's physique is a little bit bigger than fitness, I believe, but smaller than like women's open. It's kind of like imagine 212, but like not quite. It's hard to explain. It's like saying there's like a difference between, imagine like a difference between I guess kind of like classic and men's open, which I would say is kind of 212, but it's also height restriction because you need to be short in order to take advantage of the 212 weight cap.
I was gonna say if I did 212, I would be like right now because I weighed in this morning at 213, so I got
Yeah.
just a little bit, but that would be me, and I would get smoked.
Yeah. So it's like kind of the 212, which is kind of the middle ground, but you need to be short to take advantage of it. So imagine, a middle ground like that, but any height can kind of compete in it.
Hmm.
So it's like, okay, so like imagine, so like men's physique to be 209, you could be 219 in classic. You could be any weight in men's open. Imagine like 235 or something for this division. And then like men's open is like 250 and up or something for like your height. So like if there was a middle ground between classic and men's open, that's kind of what men's physique is, or like women's physique. So 2015, we get men's physique, which is what I do. And then 2018 is the first year for classic physique. So classic physique for the Arnold Classic is still fucking fresh. We're talking, we had 5 years. This year coming up, 2024 would be 6. So
Hmm.
um, it's very interesting to see that classic physique came around long after, like a few years after men's physique did. Then it's saying here, this is according to Wikipedia. For the most part, Wikipedia is relatively accurate. But
It's
it's saying
100% reliable.
it's pretty reliable. It's teachers in high school and shit act like it's like the most unreliable source. I'm like, it's really not that bad.
No, it's just that it's able to be influenced. That's more so where
Yes.
the line gets drawn because in the teaching world, you try and have everything be concrete, whereas something that can be influenced, like whenever, like I don't know, when the Pats would win, like when the Pats beat the Falcons,
Hmm.
Tom Brady was listed as the father of of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah.
So like it's stuff that can be influenced.
Yeah. I mean, there is some leeway you got to give it. There is some. You got to take it with a grain of salt. But like it's saying here, men's physique, I guess, wasn't held in 2021 for some reason. women's physique hasn't been held, I guess, since 2020. 212 hasn't been held since 2018. Figure wasn't held in 2021. So it's like these weird like gaps you're getting in these competitions. I'm not sure why. Let me look it up. Why they didn't hold it for like men's physique, for instance. Let's see if there's a reason why.
This is at the Arnold, you're saying?
Yeah, the Arnold didn't hold men's physique in 2021.
I mean, that was the first year after COVID, so I'd be willing to bet that it might have had something to do with that. Because COVID slammed us at the end of 2019 and went into 2020, and then
Yeah.
because it was March 2020.
Oh, Sergio Oliva Jr. won Best Poser of 2021 Men's Olympia. Or sorry, not Men's Olympia, Arnold Classic. Interesting.
Oh, they had the thing? Oh, okay. I would have thought it was completely canceled, but if they had it,
No,
that
no,
doesn't
no.
make
No, they
sense.
had
Yeah.
it. They had it. They just didn't have men's physique. They cut out a
Mhm.
lot. They cut out, so they had women's fitness, they had women's bikini, so they had classic physique, and then they had open. So they actually cut out a lot of, so they only had 4 actual divisions. So I think it had to have been something involving COVID. Um,
Maybe
and
like
like,
enough of the top competitors wouldn't have gone, so they said like we're not going to put on like a, not saying that if the top guys don't go, it's not going to be a good showing, but it's not the showing they would have wanted. So I think that might have been
I think it
involved.
just came down
But
to
that's
like,
all. Yeah.
I think it came down to like they only had a certain number of competitors because there's only 10 competitors in the open,
So that's my thought
10 in the
that, and
classic, 10 in the
because there were
bikini,
also a
and then
lot of
8 in the
travel.
fitness.
There's a lot of travel restrictions. Like here in
Yeah.
Mass, I like couldn't go anywhere. Like the border was essentially shut down. Like we were
Yeah.
more or less full. I know it was a little bit better down there where you
Well,
are.
yeah, but this is like March 2021. It was still pretty locked down. Everything was still pretty
Yeah,
heavily. This is when I lived I lived in Pineville. So that was, we were still like masks everywhere, social distancing and all of that because it didn't really calm down until, okay, actually, no, this is just after I moved here where I live now. And everything didn't calm down until well after, like at least 6 months after I moved here.
yeah.
So it was still pretty strict at that time. So that COVID had to have played a big role. Um, there were other countries competing. So like in the men's open, Hassan Mustafa competed. He's from Egypt. Ian Vaier, Canada. Mohammed El Imam, that's Russia. Seung Cho Lee, that's South Korea. So like there were other competitors there as well from other countries, but 2021 they had to cut back. 2022 Arnold and 2023 Arnold, they're back to normal basically. I don't think they held a figure for this year for 2023, like women's figure, but Aaron Banks won 22 and 23 Arnold Classic. That was the year 22. He also won the Olympia for men's physique, and then he lost 23. But Ramon is where he won that in 20. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention too is that personally, I feel that over time, I would not be surprised if at some point the Arnold is kind of held in the same regard as the Olympia.
We mentioned this in the past how we think it might even overtake the Olympia.
It's possible. The difference I think is just coming down to the title itself. The Olympia
Hmm.
title has been known as the top of the top for many, many years. But if we can get to the point where maybe like Arnold Classic becomes like some other name, because it's like imagine being called a Mr. Arnold. Like it doesn't really make any sense. So like if they were to able to change the name so that like you could be a Mr. Olympia, where like that's like a title to have, where in the case of Arnold, there's like, some sort of title to be given and had. But what's also good about Arnold Classic is that they also have different competitions in different countries as well. They've had it
Hmm.
in Europe, which takes place in Spain, Brazil, Australia. Um, they had one in Asia, which was held in 2016. They haven't held it since in Asia, only that one year. Africa, they had it for a few years. Australia, they had it a few years. But now they just have the Europe, the US, and the UK. Um, but most countries. They stopped in 2020 because of COVID, didn't pick it up again in 2021. And this doesn't have any information on 2022. So I'm not sure where that's at. I got to look that up. But yeah, so for the most part, the Arnold Classic does compete pretty globally, which is cool, where
Yeah.
the Olympia is just one country, which is the US. Well,
Well, the way I was,
they have like the Olympia Amateur, which takes place in Europe, but they have
yeah,
the actual Olympias in the US.
the way I see it is like, and to loop it back to, we brought up WWF and everything from earlier in the podcast, but there are multiple titles in that. So you have like the world heavyweight, you have like the bantamweight, you have obviously it's evolved into
Yeah,
different things. So like the intercontinental title. So the way I see it is that it's going to come down to personal preference over what title you want to ultimately compete for. And it if Arnold can draw more money and more finances, people will want to do that more than the Olympia. But the Olympia will always be cemented as like it's like if you think about any sport, the world heavyweight title is across any sport that has a belt. That's like what people can think of.
yeah,
But once you're in the sport and you have a deeper understanding, you go for the ones that interest you instead of what everyone else thinks. If that makes any sense.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of where like the Arnold comes in because you have like if you look at the winners of different Arnold competitions, like for instance, Kai Green won the Arnold Classic in South America and Australia, and then Dexter Jackson won Europe and Africa. So it's like they're picking these different competitions to compete in. And I think also like that's kind of a good way of doing it for. So like 2016, Kai Green won the actual Arnold Classic, but then he also won South America and Australia. So it's a good way to kind of market yourself in that aspect, especially back in 2016. Like obviously social media was still pretty relevant in 2016, but the more you compete in other countries, the better off you are. So um, it's as far as like popularity goes, you're better off. You're going to get more popularity in that sense with more competitions and all of that. So there is that aspect. And the biggest thing I want to talk about with the Arnold Classic is that he has been gradually increasing the prize money
Hmm.
and almost increasing it in like respect to how much the actual division brings in. So with the Olympia, it's basically the rule of thumb I kind of think of as 400 grand for the open, 50 grand for everything else, which is pretty much accurate. Everything else is pretty much 50 grand for first, 400 grand for first in men's Olympia or the men's open. With the Arnold Classic, for classic physique, for instance, you win 60 grand. And he's
Hmm.
talking about increasing that even more, drastically over the years. Men's
Well, that's
Open,
because the classic is most similarly aligned with what he was doing back when he was bodybuilding. That's why it's called classic. So I think that's why he would have a bigger emphasis on that than anything else.
yeah. So like, and to me, it's that's what's really going to be the deciding factor of who goes where because if there's a lot more money involved, obviously like men's open, 400 grand is still more than the Arnold Classic, they give 300 grand. And which is actually increased drastically. I think 2 years ago when Nick Walker won, it was 120 grand, where that's second now. Second's 130 grand. So the amount of money per winner has drastically gone up over time. But if you compare it to men's Olympia or the Mr. Olympia competitions, and with how fast Arnold is growing, the sports festival and all of that, I think that in time you're going to start seeing, especially classic physique, transitioning over to Arnold. I think like CBum could potentially be like the end of like the real big guys competing at the Olympia. It's possible because you're already winning more at the Arnold,
Yep.
and the Arnold is still like top tier. A lot of the guys who end up winning the Arnold also win the Olympia. So it's not like you're competing in a different league. You're still competing pretty much against the same people.
And I was going to say too the conditioning because the events are relatively close to one another because the Arnold is in March. So
Yeah.
you have if you took it like I know Dino stays conditioned basically between the Olympia and the Arnold, because he is running house at the Arnold right now, like for the past couple of years. But you get more guys willing to be in that conditioned state, which is really, really beneficial.
Um, yeah, let me look up the classic Arnold Classic winnings over time. Let me look that up again. Let's see. So yeah, it's a 50%. So 2022 is 200 grand. 2023 Arnold Classic is 300 grand for men's open. Um, let me see. So this is what I was looking at earlier. So for, yeah, 7 grand for like women's wellness, 10 grand for men's physique, 10 grand for bikini, 25 grand for women's fitness. Classic physique was 60 grand. Men's open was 300 grand. So like it's, if they, the problem that a lot of people have with the Olympia, and the thing that Arnold wants to change is people heavily disagree with the prize winnings for the Olympia per division, just because of the popularity that's being brought in from different divisions.
Yeah,
Personally, I feel, especially in Arnold's case, I think men's physique is very much slept on. A lot of guys don't realize it. A lot of people don't realize it, but men's physique is very heavily followed. A lot of the guys in men's physique have millions and millions of followers on Instagram and all of that. I mean, it's not to the degree of like classic physique. I think classic physique is a lot bigger. Don't get me wrong, but men's physique is not like dead. You know, it's not like no one watches it. Like there's millions and millions of people that watch men's physique and follow the people. I mean, Ryan Terry, who won, he's got well over 3 million followers on Instagram or something.
yeah,
Jeremy Potvin has over a million. I think Aaron Banks is kind of in that same ballpark. So, I mean, Brendan Hendrickson, Andre Ferguson, a lot of these guys have a lot of followers and a lot of influence. So when you're going into a competition like the Olympia, where they're getting paid the same amount through all the divisions besides men's open, it's like, this is kind of bullshit, because today's day and age, you're getting more people excited for the classic physique than you are for the men's open, you know? And that's something that the Olympia hasn't really taken into account. 50 grand for classic, I think is kind of they're kind of getting fucking robbed, considering the Arnold is a smaller show, in quotations, smaller show, and they're still getting paid more, 10 grand more. But that's, the whole purse combined is a lot bigger at the Arnold than it is at the Olympia. So I think over time, especially with like Chris kind of potentially coming to the end of his reign here soon, I think that we're going to start seeing a transition, especially from classic physique over to the Arnold Classic. And then, if they start increasing the money for men's physique, possibly going in that route as well. Arnold's never really had that much respect for men's physique, unfortunately. So it's very possible that the prize winnings aren't going to be increased too much. But I think that you should pay your athletes proportionately to essentially what they're bringing in. And um, in the case of the Arnold, I think that there's no way in hell that, and as far as the prize money goes, there's no way in hell men's physique is only bringing in 1/6 of the popularity of classic physique, in my opinion. There's no way. So 10 grand to men's physique versus 60 for classic, I think that's kind of, it's kind of bullshit. But at the same time, I think that classic deserves more at the same time. So we'll see what that ends up doing. But Arnold is kind of stirring the pot a bit with these prize winnings.
Well, you know what I just realized? We talked about differentiating the title of what you would win if you were at the Arnold, and how there's clearly an emphasis on classic physique, because that's where, like, the style that Arnold competed with. So now my thinking is, you keep the Olympia, called like Mr. Olympia, whatever, but then the Arnold you could change to like the Mr. Golden Era or something like that, because the Golden Era was essentially, those guys would have been competing in today's classic physique. They would not have been competing in men's open. So that's a potential way to make the title sound catchy and incentivize people to want to watch it and then also compete in it.
What I think would be kind of cool is if like the Arnold Classic kind of became where the classic physique competitors competed, because it is called the Arnold Classic. Obviously, it's not because of classic physique, but if it
Yeah,
went
yeah,
that
yeah.
route where they're now called like the Mr. Classic or something, and then you have like the Mr. Olympia, where that's all the big guys going to, and then obviously everything else is kind of split. But I think it'd be kind of interesting to see that where you have one show you're like, all right, let's watch like the big dudes, some of the smaller ones like men's physique and bikini and all of that, but then the classic physique is the big one that they all compete at Arnold Classic. So you have essentially like two big shows to like get excited about each year, and they're roughly 6 months apart now because there's the Olympia for 2023 was announced like October 10th through the 12th or something in Vegas. So they go back and forth now. In case you guys didn't know, they're going to do Vegas one year, then Tampa or Miami or whatever it is the next year. So they go back and forth between Florida. Maybe it's Orlando. I forget, but Florida and Vegas. They go back and forth to reach a broader audience is their goal. So this year is going to be Vegas, and this year is going to be October 10th to the 12th. I think a big portion of that is most likely because of whether or not the F1 race is going to happen, because that really changes up the infrastructure in Vegas for like a solid month. So that probably plays a role. But we got the Olympia 10th through 12th, and then the Arnold Classic almost takes place at the beginning of March every single year. So you got roughly a 6 month window there between the Olympia and the Arnold Classic. So for the bodybuilders, you got like you probably take like a month off, like rest your body a bit from pushing it. You probably got like a month to maybe push it a bit further as far as size goes and weight, maybe 2 months. And then you can do like a 12 to 16 week prep at that point. Obviously, it's all depending on the athlete. It's possible that, they do a 2 month push to put on some size and then like a 4 month prep where they don't do it too harsh. You slowly taper down your calories and all of that. So there's plenty of time between these shows. It's not like they're right back to back. Like it would suck if it was like a 2 month window, like that would suck because like you can't really do anything besides get ready for the next show in the middle of prep. It's not like you can have a break, but with six
Yeah.
months in between, that's kind of perfect for the athletes. And then right after the Arnold Classic, can do the same thing going into the Olympia. So I think it's good timing for the athletes as in general, but I think that Arnold will stir the pot and will bring over more and more people over to the Arnold Classic over time. But
Well,
I
he's
mean,
always been the person to cause controversy. So
yeah, if he says he'll do it, he can do it. I mean, that's how he's always been. He said he was like, I'm going to become the governor, and everybody thought that was hilarious, and then he fucking became the governor for California for a while.
hmm
It's he said when he sets his mind to things, he makes it happen. He's one of the most driven people out there. Obviously, he has help from outside people. It's not just him alone. Joe Weider helped him out. Joe Weider kind of discovered him, and then he kind of married into politics prior to being a governor. Acting kind of came about because of his size. For Conan Barbarian, because of bodybuilding, they approached him for that role, and then that kind of branched into acting. Obviously, he wanted to be an actor prior to Conan Barbarian, but that's kind of his gate, his bridge. So this is something that I firmly believe in is that luck comes from like success kind of requires a little bit of luck, but a little bit of luck comes from hard work.
hmm
And so the harder you work, the more luck you're going to have. The more luck you're going to have, the more success you're going to have. So that's kind of Arnold. He's always worked very, very hard. And now he has the popularity, the backing, all of that, and the financial standing to theoretically make Arnold Classic the show to compete in. It might lose him some money at first, but if he gets to the point where it's the show, then he's good to go from there. He'll just make more and more money. And he also has, the Arnold strongman competition. So I mean, he's, the branding of the Arnold Classic and his name in general has many facets to it. Where Mr. Olympia is just one event, every year that's ran by the IFBB, and really, honestly, I think that if they can, the other thing that I think that can change things is if they get more consistent judging at the Arnold Classic versus the Olympia, because that's the thing that people get upset about every year is the judging and the inconsistencies in the Olympia every year. Where if the Arnold Classic can get more particular on what they're looking for, then it's going to be easier for them to have like a look and have like a more loyal fan base, I guess, in that sense, because it is very frustrating when the Olympia each year they're looking for something different, you know. but that's bodybuilding in general. But I think that Arnold, they could find something more concrete, more standardized over the years to come.
And I think finding like a name that is recognized in the judging world, because with the Olympia, Steve Weinberger, people know the name, people
Mhm.
respect the hell out of the name, and when you think about the judges, obviously they're esteemed in their own rights, but you don't have that name recognition like Steve brings to the Olympia. So I think finding something like that to really cement the judging panel, that would be beneficial too.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with a lot of the judging now is that a lot of the, I mean, not really the NPC. I mean, not in the grand scheme of things, but a lot of these bigger shows, a lot of the judges have been doing, been judging it for a very long time, and a lot of them weren't even bodybuilders, really. Obviously, Steve Weinberger was married to, or is married to, Bev Francis, I believe. So, like, he's been around the industry for a very long time, and he co-owns the Bev Francis Powerhouse. So, like, he's not new to the sport by any means.
Mm.
And before even judging, it wasn't like he was new to it. It was just, I think that for me, part of judging should also come from experience. Um, to kind of cement that even further, I watch a lot of racing, and pretty much every single commentator in racing has to almost guaranteed to be a racer at some point in that league. So, for instance, F1, I was watching the F1 race before we recorded today. They're racing in Abu Dhabi. It's the last race of the year, but the commentator, I think both commentators in the English language are both F1 drivers. They were F1 drivers. So when you're commentating, obviously there are commentators at the Olympia and the Arnold Classic and all of that, but I think that the judges, they should encourage like retired bodybuilders to be the judges, because they know way more about what goes into it than the judges do, especially if the judges never competed, you know.
You gotta contractually obligate any previous Olympia winner. You either have to do the Masters division or you have to be a judge.
That's like actual totalitarian and fucking dystopian. In order to
Ronnie
compete, you have
Coleman
to.
with his sticks coming out to compete for the Masters.
That's rough, dude. He just do the wheelchair division, probably is what he'd do.
Is
Um,
there a Masters wheelchair division?
Probably. There's bound to be. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but there's probably is. But I think that there should be more bodybuilders in the judging panel. I have looked into it for the NPC side of things and all of that. And the downside to it is that you can't compete and judge at the same time. It's a conflict of
Hmm.
interest. There's obviously going to be some bias and all of that there. So you have to be done competing when you're judging, which is fair. I understand that it sucks, but because I want to get into judging and into posing, all
Yeah,
that, like
posing has always been
posing
your thing.
coaching. Yeah, posing coaching one day. I need more experience for that, but judging I want to get into one day as well if I can, and I think that would be very very fun. But I have to be done bodybuilding in order to do that, so it'll be a while before I were to ever get into judging. But yeah, it's wild. It's like you have to get, they have to approve you. You kind of like get your license. There's no license for it, but like they have to approve you to be a judge. You have to be like a licensed judge with them or whatever. And you have to
Yeah.
uphold that license and all of that. It's kind of like being a competitor. You have to have an NPC card and all of that to compete, and IFBB Pro card and all of that. So I think if they standardize the judging, increase the prize winnings over time, I think that the Arnold could very much be the replacement for the Olympia eventually. And uh, we'll see what ends up happening. I mean, just the past few years, they've drastically increased from 120 grand to 300 grand for the men's open. So who knows, how long it's going to take before they're past 400 grand. It could be very soon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, inflation continues to rise, so there's going to be more and more ability to dump into. So while I mean, it does sound like a lot of money, it is a lot of money. It's not as much as it could be, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they could work with a lot more there, especially for classic physique. I truly think this is my thing. If I was talking to Arnold and I was like, if you really want to make your show bigger than the Olympia, just classic physique. If you just capture classic physique, give them like a 200 grand prize purse, or not even prize purse, just like 200 grand for like first place. Like that alone will be like enough, because that's quadruple the Olympia. If you just give them
Hmm.
a shit ton of money to win, you're going to pull in so many more athletes from that. Granted, it's far enough away to where they could do both. So it's not like you have to choose one or the other. But most of the people who are aiming to win the Olympia only do the Olympia. So if you could pull those guys, like Chris Bumstead, for instance, over to the Classic, the Arnold Classic, you're fucking golden. And
Yeah.
that's the way that the division's going. I mean, it's the popularity of classic physique is way more than men's open now, honestly, in my opinion, especially when it comes to like social media and all of that. Classic physique is just at a different level at this point.
Well, bodybuilding people care who looks the best, and for men's classic physique, you guys, that division looks the best. Men's
Mhm.
open, like, we in the world can appreciate what's going on, but to the outside world, most people give the reaction of "Hey," or something like that. And so in for classic physique, someone sees, like, Chris Bumstead and goes, that is an aesthetically pleasing person.
I mean, I would even argue that arguably to the average person, men's physique is way more appealing than classic physique.
Mm,
I would argue that.
yeah.
A lot of people think that classic physique is too much, where
I've
men's
heard that as
physique,
well, yeah.
yeah, and men's physique is way more appealing. I mean, that's the whole point of men's physique, is like how appealing can we make a physique? That's the goal. Is like symmetrical, aesthetic. Like how appealing can the human body become? Where classic is a combination of size and symmetry and aesthetics. Men's open is basically at this point how freaky, how large plus symmetry can we get? It's like
Mhm.
size plus conditioning, basically, is what it's come down to. So, yes, I mean, I think if he captures classic physique, encourages men's physique to the general public, then you're golden, especially the classic physique side of things. It's just within bodybuilding, it's just way more popular now with the younger generations than men's open is. And at the same time, it's way safer to compete in classic physique than it is men's open. Um, and the barrier of entry is a lot lower as well. So you're going to get more competitors in classic physique. I mean, you have to be built for open to compete in open, where like obviously you have to be built to be a bodybuilder in the first place. I mean, you can see a clear distinction between someone who shouldn't be a bodybuilder and someone who could be a bodybuilder, especially when it comes to anabolics. I mean, there's most guys who take anabolics don't even look like they take it. So like they can't be bodybuilders. But if you, the barrier, like if you're going to be a men's physique competitor, the barrier to move up to classic is really not that much. It's really just your legs. So those are pretty close together, but then open is just fucking way beyond. And at the same time, to be men's open, like you have to be able to put on size like a motherfucker. It's crazy. And like I could see guys competing in classic who I wouldn't say like, yeah, he's going to be a crazy classic competitor, but I see guys who I'm like, yeah, he's going to compete men's open. And there's only a couple I can think of that are like that. Like that's how niche it is at this point. It's like you have to put on size without even trying to compete in men's open at this point.
Yeah,
So barrier of entry is just it's a different world for men's open. So that's what they really need to capture. It'll totally bounce in the direction of classic and men's physique, in my opinion.
for
So
sure,
we'll
for
see.
sure.
We'll see what happens. But yeah, so Arnold overall, very influential, great guy. It seems on paper. I hope to meet him one day. I hope to experience what Ramon experienced last year at the Arnold. I don't know if you remember seeing that, but when Ramon got
He
handed the trophy from Arnold,
he, like, freaked out because Arnold was
yeah,
the one giving it to him.
yeah, he's like, "It's you, it's you." So yeah, I hope to experience that one day. Yeah, just flex on him. Um, but yeah, I also think that Arnold is starting to find classic physique as the most appealing as well.
Yep,
Men's open, less and less vacuums nowadays. They're just looking freaky. Classic physique just looks good. And that's kind of his era. It's very similar to his era. So I think he's starting to become biased, and we'll see how that goes coming up. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the future for Arnold Classic and Arnold the General. I just hope that he lives a longer life than most people, just so that he can be around for the industry and see what happens to it.
yeah. Hey, I'm all for it.
But with that being said, this is our installment of Influencer Review. There's so much to touch on Arnold. I think we got to do a part two of this.
Yeah, we
Um,
didn't even do his, like, routines or anything like that, so we'll
yeah,
definitely touch on him again. Maybe we'll do it next week, but you'll for sure be seeing another episode on this.
yeah, definitely. We just kind of talked about his influence on the industry as a total. So we'll talk more about the micro stuff coming up soon.
Yeah. Alright, y'all.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Peace.